I heard it before I saw it. The scrape of claws against wet pavement, slow and heavy, as if every step was a gamble with the last breath left inside. That sound tore through the silence of Asheville's empty street in the night. I turned my head. Under the sickly glow of a street lamp, a shadow appeared. A Doberman puppy, no more than 4 months old. Its body was nothing but skin draped over bone, ribs sharp beneath matted fur, legs trembling, ready to give out at any second. But the eyes, God, those eyes, dark brown, shining unnaturally in the dark. They locked on me, as if the whole world had turned its back, and I was the last hope it could find. It didn't bark, didn't whimper, just stood there, staring. I turned away. A lifetime of hard lessons had taught me not to take on another burden. I kept walking. But behind me, the soft clatter of tiny claws followed. 5 steps, 10 steps. I stopped. It stopped. I moved. It moved. A silent game played by 2 souls, each echo striking my chest like the tick of a clock counting down. When I reached the steps of the old wooden house at the edge of town, I thought it would give up. But it didn't. It stumbled up after me, then collapsed on the cold cement by my front door. Its head lifted weakly, eyes never leaving mine. I muttered, my voice hoarse and tired. "You're not coming in." But I knew those words weren't for it. I was speaking to myself. In the darkness of the living room, I stood still, hand on the latch. Outside, it lay there. I tried to walk to the kitchen to think of the cold soup waiting in the fridge, but my throat locked tight. Then a sound slipped through the crack of the door. Not a howl, not a cry, just a thin rasp like wind threading through broken wood, the sound of a life clinging on. I cursed under my breath, yanked open the closet and pulled out an old blanket. When I opened the door, its small head lifted again, those eyes still holding mine. I tossed the blanket onto the step. "Just for tonight," I said sharply. "Don't get used to it." It didn't rush, didn't snatch. It dragged itself forward, lowered its head, and rested its chin on the edge of the blanket. A long sigh slipped from its chest. So fragile it almost wasn't there, yet carrying the weight of the whole world. I shut the door, sat in the dark, heart pounding like I'd just come from battle. But that sigh clung to me, refusing to let go. That night, I knew I had opened a door. Not the wooden one at the porch. The other door, the one inside my chest. The one I thought had rusted shut long ago. Morning is always cruel. It exposes what we tried to hide in the night. When the first light slipped through the curtain, I stepped into the living room and saw him. Shadow, still curled up beside the space heater I'd left running the night before. He hadn't moved, as if that spot had become his territory. But the moment I lifted a foot, those brown eyes snapped open, sharp like a soldier on watch. I froze, staring back. He didn't whine, didn't leap up, just tracked me with that relentless gaze. I exhaled, turned away, and began pulling on my coat, tightening my laces. Yet every movement of mine stayed caught in those eyes. Not a pleading look, a demanding one. I muttered under my breath, "Fine, let's go." He didn't spring up the way other dogs would. He simply rose, limping toward the door. Each step dragged his right leg across the floor. But he didn't slow. He kept pace beside me, as if every painful stride was a vow he refused to break. The morning streets of Asheville shimmered with mist. I had once led service dogs across minefields during my years in uniform, and I knew what it meant when a dog chose to walk with you through pain. That wasn't instinct. That was an oath. Blue Ridge Veterinary Clinic appeared just as the sun crested the horizon, a small, humble building. The wooden sign above the door still bore the cracks from the storm 2 years ago. People told me I should replace it. I kept it the way you keep an old scar. Some cracks aren't meant to be hidden. They remind you that you survived. Inside, the smell of disinfectant and cold steel clawed at me. Memories surged back. Battlefields, field tents, blood of men and dogs mixing in mud. I shook my head. This wasn't war. This was home. But ghosts never let go so easily. I lifted Shadow onto the exam table. I thought he'd thrash like other strays, trembling or growling. But no. He sat still, eyes following my every move. No fear, no fight. As if he understood I was about to uncover what he had been carrying all along. I began to check him. His body was a map of scars, a gash across the shoulder, straight cuts down the ribs. Not random street injuries. Too precise, too deliberate. Someone had done this. Someone had carved his small body into evidence. My fingers brushed something hard along his shoulder. Cold. Familiar. A microchip. My chest tightened. I pulled out the scanner. A short beep split the silence. Numbers flashed on the screen. My hand trembled as I typed them into the system. The result came back. John Smith. A dry laugh slipped out of me, a cheap alias. But the address beneath it froze my blood. Richard Hale, the wealthiest man in town. A man who devoured land like weeds, raising steel giants where old farms once stood. I had treated his horses before. His eyes were cold as wet stone, his smile never reaching his pupils. People whispered he was cruel to animals, but no one ever proved it. And now, his name sat inside Shadow's body. I looked down at him. Those brown eyes didn't blink. Silent, steady, as if he already knew what I had discovered, as if he was waiting for me to put it into words. I swallowed hard, laid a hand on his head, whispered almost without knowing, "Where did you come from, kid?" He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into my palm, pressing harder. No answer. But in that silence, I heard a truth clearer than any words could ever give. The clinic door burst open with a crack, the little bell on the frame clattering like someone had strangled it. I looked up, my hand still resting on Shadow's ragged fur. The man who stepped in needed no introduction. I knew him at once. From his stride, his air. Richard Hale. Tailored gray suit, black tie perfectly knotted, leather shoes polished as if dust had never touched them. Silver hair combed back to a shine. But none of those details carried the weight that pressed down on the room. It was the way he crossed the threshold, as though he already owned the place. "Dr. Carter." His voice slid out smooth, every syllable a hidden blade. "I believe you're holding something that belongs to me." Shadow shot to his feet, a low growl rumbling from his throat. I pressed my hand hard against his shoulder, steadying him. My own heart was no steadier. I forced my voice flat. "I don't believe there's anything here that belongs to you." His eyes narrowed, his smile never reaching them. "Don't play games." The dog. He escaped from my training facility. I've come to take him back. Training. I nearly laughed, but bitterness rose instead. I glanced at Shadow, his body etched with scars, eyes still carrying fear, then lifted my head, jaw tight. "This dog came to me half dead, torn to pieces." "If he's truly yours, how do you explain that?" Hale chuckled, a hollow sound like metal against stone. "Puppies stumble. Puppies bruise. You're the veterinarian here. You should know that better than anyone." Before I could respond, a woman's voice cut in. Emily Ward, my assistant, had stepped out from the mixing room, steam curling off the coffee cup in her hand. She froze, eyes widening as she recognized the figure in the room. But in a single breath, her gaze sharpened. Those wounds weren't accidents, Mr. Hale. That was abuse, and I'm a witness. The air thickened. Shadow pressed closer to my leg, his body taut, ready to spring. I felt his tremors vibrating through my shoes. Hale turned toward Emily, a flicker of annoyance flashing in his eyes. "And you are?" "Emily Ward," she answered without hesitation, voice hard as steel. "Assistant to Dr. Carter, and a witness, if necessary," a twitch at the corner of his mouth. Then he stepped closer, narrowing the gap to just a few feet. His voice dropped, sharp as a razor. "Listen carefully, Carter. I sit on the State Veterinary Advisory Board. One call from me and this little clinic is gone. 20 years of your work, gone in a heartbeat. Don't be foolish enough to throw it away for a stray." My chest felt heavy as stone. He wasn't wrong. One signature, one phone call, and everything I'd built could vanish. My career, my reputation, the trust of this community. I looked down at Shadow. He didn't whine, didn't retreat. Those brown eyes burned, unyielding, as if the word compromise didn't exist. And in that silence, his defiance spoke louder than any threat. Emily slammed her cup onto the counter, the crack of it cutting through the tension. "Go ahead and try. I'll call the press. All of Asheville will know how you used power to bully a vet just to reclaim an injured dog." A flash of anger flared in Hale's eyes, gone as quickly as it came. He swallowed it down, replacing it with a cold smirk. "You think you're clever," he whispered, voice thin as a blade. "But I have friends everywhere. Police, courts, the board. Don't be stupid enough to stand against me." He spun on his heel, shoes striking the floor like hammers. At the door he glanced back, smile frozen. "Keep him, Carter. Let's see how long you last." The door slammed. The bell shrieked, metal clanging like madness. Shadow stayed rigid, eyes locked on the door as though the enemy still lingered there. Slowly, I lifted my hand from his shoulder, only then realizing it was trembling. Emily braced herself against the counter, her fingers shaking. Her voice came low, almost a whisper. "Do you realize what you just did?" I drew a breath, my voice rough. "I just refused a man who could destroy me with a single call. And you don't regret it?" I looked at Shadow. He turned, pressed his forehead against my leg, a wordless thank you. In his eyes, I saw pain, yes, but also something more, unshakable trust. I closed my eyes, exhaled hard. "No. No regret." Emily dropped into a chair, sweeping her hair back. "Then we'd better prepare." "Because nothing is going to stay quiet now," I nodded. Outside, the wind came down from the mountains, rattling the cracked wooden sign out front. The sound carried like a warning. The storm had begun, and I had just stepped into its center. The next morning, the clinic no longer felt like the steady place it once was. The light through the windows hadn't changed. The sharp tang of disinfectant was still in the air, but everything seemed covered by a darker shadow. The shadow of Richard Hale's name. Emily sat at the back desk, flipping quickly through old case files, her eyes sharp as blades. At my feet, Shadow lay with his head resting on my dusty boots. He wasn't sleeping deeply, only pretending. I could see every twitch of his ears, as if any sound might turn into a threat. Emily whispered, "Michael, that chip, the data isn't clean." "There are duplicates," I turned. "What do you mean?" She slid a few old files onto the table, her fingers trembling as she pointed at the screen of our worn-out computer. "Look here. Same chip ID, but 2, sometimes 3 different records. One dog marked as adopted, then vanished without a trace." I stared at the numbers. This wasn't a clerical error. I had seen plenty of sloppy records, but this was deliberate erasure. Someone's whitewashing, I muttered. We traced the addresses in the files, fake names, muddled entries. Every trail pointed to one place, an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. By the time we arrived, the sky had dropped into dusk. The rusted steel door was chained but not secure. Emily and I shoved hard. The hinges screamed like metal mourning itself. The moment the door cracked open, the stench hit me. Rust, dried blood, stagnant water. Shadow froze, his hackles rising, a low growl vibrating out of him. We raised our flashlights. What we saw made me grip the doorframe just to stay upright. Iron rings are still embedded in the concrete floor, broken chains dangling, claw marks gouged deep into the walls, long, desperate streaks that seemed to tear at the bricks themselves. And in the center, a wide, empty circle, concrete stained dark, streaks of brown-red that needed no explanation. I swallowed the bitterness clawing its way up my throat. A dog-fighting pit. Emily lowered her light, her hand trembling as it touched my shoulder. "Michael, they used this place to—" I nodded, my voice stuck in my throat. I had seen cruelty in war, atrocities that still lived in my bones. But this was different. Not chaos of battle, purposeful torment, engineered for someone's twisted entertainment. Shadow slipped away from my side, walking slowly toward an iron ring still locked into the floor. He lowered his head, sniffed. Then a soft sound broke out of him. A whimper, faint and fragile. He scratched lightly at a dark stain spread across the concrete, then recoiled, eyes flickering. I rushed to him, my heart splintering. I dropped to my knees, wrapping him tight in my arms. "It's over, Shadow. It's over now." But my voice trembled, a plea as much for myself as for him. He shuddered, then buried his head into my arm. And in that moment, I didn't see just a dog. I saw a soldier, small, scarred, who had walked out of a hell no creature should ever endure. Emily turned away, tears streaking down her cheeks. But when she spoke, her voice was sharp, hard as steel. "If Shadow made it out, how many more are still trapped?" "We can't stop now." I nodded, my hand closing around a length of rusted chain until it bit into my skin, drawing blood. "From here on, this isn't work. This is a vow." In the dark of that warehouse, with Shadow's ragged breath pressed against my ear, I understood. I had stepped deeper into this fight, and there was no turning back. That night, Emily and I left the warehouse with a stack of files stuffed deep in my coat pocket. Papers marked with cloned microchips, false names, and hollow dates of adoption. Each number felt like dried blood on a page. Evidence. Evidence of a trafficking and fighting ring. Shadow limped beside me, his front legs still dragging slightly, but he never fell behind. His eyes scanned every shadowed corner, as if he already knew what danger waited there. The streets were empty, the yellow streetlights casting broken patches across cracked pavement. Summer cicadas screamed in the trees, their shrill cry stretching the night taut like a wire about to snap. Then came the sound. Footsteps. Not fast, not slow, just steady enough to raise the hair on my neck. I turned. From the darkness of an alley, 4 men emerged. Dark coats, caps pulled low. I didn't need to see their faces to know they weren't here by chance. One spoke, voice rough. "Hand over the dog." I pulled the leash closer, my voice dry as steel. "You're mistaken." "He's mine," the man sneered. "Yours?" He was ours. And he's coming back. The world around me narrowed into a cage. 2 blocked the way ahead, 2 behind. No escape. Shadow growled. the sound low but booming in the confined space. His body braced, and my heart pounded like a drum in my ribs. The leader stepped forward. For a moment, everything slowed. The glint of the streetlight off the blade in his hand, the rasp of his breath, the metallic tang of rust in the air. Then Shadow moved. A bark tore the night, sharp as thunder. That small, skeletal body launched into the man's chest. The impact cracked through the alley, followed by a scream that split the dark. Blood sprayed from his arm where Shadow's teeth tore in. I froze, stunned. I had never seen such force erupt from a body so frail. But Shadow didn't stop. He planted himself before me, legs rooted like steel, eyes blazing. The others roared, rushing in. I dropped the leash, grabbed a rotting plank from the gutter. My first swing was clumsy, but it connected, smashing a shoulder. The man howled. His fist swung back, grazing my face. My ear rang, vision flashing white. Shadow lunged again, jaws clamping onto another man's pant leg, yanking him down hard. Shoes skidded across concrete, curses tangled with Shadow's savage growl. Then steel flashed again. A knife. I saw it clearly, driving toward me. "Shadow!" I shouted. But he had already leapt, intercepting the strike. I swung the plank with everything I had, smashing the attacker's arm. The knife clattered onto concrete. Shadow pinned him, teeth hovering at his skin, growl shaking the air. The last 3 men froze. A flicker of hesitation. Then rage. One barked, "Fall back!" They retreated, dragging each other into the dark, spitting curses as they vanished. I collapsed onto the pavement, chest heaving like it would burst. Shadow staggered beside me, his body soaked in blood, but his eyes never left the shadows where they had disappeared. I pulled him into my arms, my hands wet with hot blood. "You're insane," I whispered, pressing my forehead into his matted fur. "You just saved my life." He looked at me, eyes clouded with tears yet still burning, a fire that refused to die. Under the flickering streetlight, I understood. This was no accident. This was the line. From this moment on, Shadow and I were bound by an unspoken vow to fight to the end no matter the cost. After the ambush, I knew time had run out. We had to find the root of this ring, or everything Shadow and I had bled for would turn to ash. One final file led me to the outskirts of the city, to an abandoned slaughterhouse. The walls stood tall and stained, the iron doors rusted, the wind slipping through cracks with a sound like groans. The moment we stepped out of the car, Shadow's hackles rose, ears stiff, a growl rolling from his throat. He knew, and I knew too. This was where it all began. We shoved the heavy doors open. Inside, darkness pressed down, thick with the stench of rust and decay. When the beam of my flashlight swept across the room, the sight froze me to the bone. Rows of cages stretched ahead, chains still smeared with blood, concrete walls carved with deep claw marks. From somewhere in the shadows came the hoarse barking of weakened dogs still locked inside, voices of the damned calling out for release. I swallowed hard, forcing myself steady. Then a voice rose from the end of the aisle, cutting straight through my chest. "Michael!" I turned, and my heart stopped. From the dark, a figure stepped forward, tall, gaunt, with a scar slashing across his face, eyes hollow and cold, but unmistakable. David. My brother. The man I had once mourned, once believed long dead. My voice cracked, broken. "No, it can't be." "You're alive." David smiled, dry and jagged, like steel grinding steel. "Only the strong survive." I chose my path, and I became the one who runs this place. He stretched his arms wide, gesturing to the cages around us. "They're not victims. They're warriors, and Shadow is one of them. He survived. He belongs to blood and fire, not to a dreamer like you." I shook my head, throat tightening. "You turned innocent creatures into a spectacle. This isn't a strength. This is destruction." David laughed, hollow and booming in the cavern of the slaughterhouse. "Still naive, like always. In this world, mercy is worthless. There are only those who survive and those who fall. I chose survival. You chose to lose." Shadow snarled, straining against the leash. His eyes burned, teeth bared, that frail frame standing as my final wall. I pressed a hand to his head, whispering, "No, Shadow. This fight is mine," but his eyes answered, "Together." David's smile curled into contempt. "Don't you get it, Michael? I'm the one who made Shadow. He carries my mark, my blood, this game. You can't erase what he is." Heat surged into my skull, my fists trembling. I had searched for him, mourned him, believed him a victim of fate. And now the truth bared itself. My brother had not died. He had chosen to become a monster. David snapped his fingers. From the dark, men emerged, hulking, holding chains and iron rods. The caged dogs erupted in howls, their cries blending with the scrape of steel, a symphony from hell. I stood in the cold chamber, Shadow pressed against my side, flashlight trembling across faces twisted by violence as they closed in. In that instant, I understood. Every escape route had been erased. This was no longer an investigation. This was blood and betrayal, the marrow of my own family name. And if I wanted to save Shadow, save the dogs trapped in those cages, I would have to face the darkness of the Carters themselves. The chorus of dogs crying from their cages rose like a hymn of suffering. Across from me stood David, my brother, the man who had become the face of everything I despised. Around him, men gripped iron rods and chains. My fingers tightened on the handle. Shadow's hot breath pressed against my leg. He trembled, not from fear, but readiness. The eruption came without warning. One man lunged, swinging his rod. I dodged, hearing the whistle of air slice past my temple. Shadow leapt, jaws locking onto his arm, dragging him hard to the concrete. His scream mingled with Shadow's growl. I wrenched the rod from his grip, swung it wide, my pulse hammering like war drums in my ears. The others closed in. I struck, I blocked, I fell, then rose again. Shadow darted like an arrow, slamming into each one, his small battered body defying every wound. He bit, he snarled, he threw himself in front of me as if he had been born for this. David stayed back, untouched. He only watched, eyes like ice, mouth curled in contempt. "You fight me for a dog?" "Michael, you never understood. Mercy is weakness," I shouted back, breath ragged as I swung again. "No, David. Cruelty is weakness. You hide from fear by becoming a monster." The fight slowed as they faltered. One man down, another clutching a torn arm. Shadow and I stood bloodied, shaking, but still upright. Sweat, blood, and dust blurred into one. At last, David stepped forward into the flashlight's beam. "If you want this to end," he hissed, voice sharp as metal, "you'll have to go through me." We faced each other. No longer vet and criminal. No longer brothers. Just two men driven by a past that had left no road back. He lunged. His fist landed like a hammer, nearly dropping me. I countered, slamming into his chest, feeling bone strain beneath my knuckles. We grappled, rolling across the concrete, breath choking, blood wetting our jaws. Shadow snarled, ready to leap, but I barked, "No, Shadow! This is mine." Time froze. David's eyes, once my brother's, were filled with hate. But deep inside, I glimpsed something else, a shard of the soul I remembered. He faltered, only for a heartbeat. But it was enough. My final strike hurled him to the floor, his breath ragged. Sirens wailed in the distance. Emily had called. Red and blue light spilled through the iron doors. David laughed, blood dripping from his mouth. "You think you've won?" "No one can erase this darkness." I dropped to my knees, hand resting on Shadow's head. He looked up at me, eyes blazing, chest heaving but unbroken. "Maybe not," I rasped, "but I can save him. And I can save the others." One by one, police stormed in, guns raised, chains clanking. David was dragged away, his eyes locked on me, burning with hatred, yet reaching for the ghost of who he once was. I let him vanish into the night, knowing we would forever stand on opposite sides. Weeks later, I sat in a sterile recovery room, Shadow's paw clutched in my hand. He had lost so much blood that the surgery had lasted through the night. Dr. Celeste Monroe stepped in, mask pulled down, her voice gentle but firm. "He made it, Michael. I've never seen a dog cling to life so fiercely, just because he refused to leave his owner." I bowed my head, tears falling onto his back. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of family again. When Shadow opened his eyes, weak but searching for mine, I whispered, "From now on, I'll never let you be alone." A month later, we stood in Boston Common, the place where I had once lifted him from the dark. But this time was different. Beside me were volunteers, boxes of food, blankets, and rescued dogs. A wooden sign rose above us, carved deep with 2 words, "Found Hope." Shadow sat proudly by my side, scars still visible, stance unshaken. People came to touch him, no longer wary of the Doberman's breed. They called him a symbol of resilience. I removed his old collar, laying it at the corner where our story began. The new one gleamed in the afternoon light, engraved with a single word, hope. I looked down at him, my voice trembling yet firm. "That night, I thought I saved you. But the truth is, you saved me." He pressed his muzzle into my palm, eyes warm, a flame unbroken by the winds of this world. The story did not end with a miracle. It ended with something simpler, truer. A man and a dog, both once abandoned, now home in each other. And in that simplicity lay the only miracle that mattered. Some wounds never heal, but a loyal gaze, a fragile breath fighting to live, that can mend a heart thought long shattered. Shadow showed me that no life is useless, and that one small chance can change an entire world. If this story touched you, open your heart. Out there, countless shadows still wait, trembling, for a hand to reach out. Share this story. Leave your rescue tale in the comments, so together we can spread love. And don't forget to subscribe, not just to follow our journey, but to be part of a family that believes every soul deserves a home.